We'll get started in just one more minute. All right, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, and we hope you are joining us for the HRSA Technical Assistance sponsored webinar on services in supportive housing. My name is Marcella McGuire, and I'll be one of your hosts for today. I'm going to start by taking you through our audio options. Take a look at this. You can click listen through your phone or click the Quick Start tab, or you can listen through your computer speakers. That's also through the Quick Start tab. I also want to highlight the chat box. If you have any problems with the technology, feel free to send an email in the bottom right, I'm sorry, not an email, but a note to our host, Rebecca Cortez. She's our technology host. She'll be assisting with any technology problems here, and you can send her a message directly through the chat service. So I'm going to move to the next slide here as we move this. This is our Services in Supportive Housing Learning Collaborative Kickoff. I apologize, a little confusion on the timing of this. We'll be going from 1:30 to 3 today, and then folks at the end of the end of our time together this afternoon, we will have details on when the next sessions are, et cetera. So we hope you're all joining us for a HRSA-sponsored webinar on services in supportive housing, sponsored by the Corporation for Supportive Housing. Get through here, give you all a little bit of background on CSH. We are a national nonprofit, 25 offices in 13 states working on improving lives for vulnerable populations, very much similar to all of you who are working in either health centers, health plans, primary care, associations as well, working on vulnerable populations, and particularly in here, building those bridges between the healthcare sector and the housing sector. We work to maximize public resources. All of us work in multiple different silos, and we certainly see that the people we serve move between multiple silos. CSH is really a systems leader in bringing together those multiple silos in order to have the desired impact for those vulnerable populations. We collaborate with communities to introduce housing solutions that promote integration between different public services systems. We want to strengthen partnerships. We want to maximize those resources. We really want to make the public sector service work for the people it was designed to serve in the most efficient manner possible. The most common question we are asked in any learning collaboratives or webinars we have is, will we receive the slides? Will we get access to today's recording? Please be aware that we will be recording this session. Anyone who signed up for the learning collaborative will be able to have access to those slides on the recording session as well. If you have members of your team who maybe want to join or end up joining late, know that you'll get copies of that. The slide deck, and that'll be attached to the recording. That will be coming to everybody who signed up for today's webinar. We'll start with an introduction for your learning collaborative guides. I said my name is Marcella McGuire. I'm CSH's National Director of Health Systems Integration. I'm based out of the city of Philadelphia, but do national work building those system linkages between the health and housing sectors. And we also have Cheryl Winter, who's our Associate Director of Consulting, joining us. Cheryl, do you want to say hi and tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Sure, great. Hi, everyone. As Marcella said, I'm Cheryl Winter. I'm so excited for this kickoff of our Learning Collaborative. My background is in supportive housing service provision in the behavioral health context, and then also in health and housing partnerships. And so now much of my work in our consulting team focuses on supporting agencies as they develop those partnerships and strengthen their service delivery models to align with best practices. So of course, you can see why I'm so excited about this Learning Collaborative. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
All right, so thank you so much. All right. We'll talk about today's agenda. We'll talk about a learning collaborative. What is a learning collaborative? It'd be great to know how many of you have been part of a learning collaborative before. I know it's starting out very similar to a webinar. Their voices on the phone, they're talking at you, but really this is meant to be much more interactive, and you'll see that's built in as we move forward. So we'll talk about a learning collaborative and how this process is happening. Know that there will be 4 of these sessions over the next as many months, and we hope that many of you, particularly the folks who are based out of Los Angeles, can join us for our CSH Summit, where our final session will be online as well as in person. That in-person touch really makes a difference, we find. So we'll talk about the Learning Collaborative purpose. We'll do the topic framing, an introduction. Cheryl will do a great introduction to supportive housing and some of the services conversations we need to have. We'll have some discussion times, and then we'll talk about next steps. Thank you to everybody who filled out the initial survey for the webinar. Thank you for everybody who gave us your goals, et cetera. Please, this is meant to be interactive. This is meant to be collaborative. We will try to tailor the material to where people are in their learning, where people are in their service development provision. But please, we always need your input in regard to really where you and your team are in the development and provision of supportive housing and supportive housing services, and we'll make sure that the materials match those needs. So that'll be part of the next steps conversation as well. So what's a Learning Collaborative? How is this different? Part of this is it's a peer-run forum to exchange expertise and challenges. For us, we'll be focused on supportive housing services. Folks from the health centers here bring an enormous, and the primary care associations and other groups, but enormous knowledge and understanding of the populations they and their agencies serve, of their communities, of their local state financing structures. All of that is important. All of that is the knowledge that we want to bring out, and not just have Cheryl and I share our expertise, though we're excited to do that, but also hear what's happening in other communities and make sure that you all begin to develop and build your networks and support each other. Folks, I believe, sign on to this because they're somewhere in the stages from thinking about supportive housing, thinking about developing supportive housing, working with supportive housing providers, developing service models, developing financing structures, et cetera, or really delivering supportive housing services, whether that's to individuals who live in supportive housing and come to your health center, whether that's a more mobile service that supports a supportive housing project. We really want to hear from you and have you all your real-life examples and to support each other. Part of this is facilitated collaboration. We're focusing our conversations and questions today about trying to adjust challenges in service provisions and trying to advance best practices on the tools for implementation. If folks have other ideas, we really want to hear them about what they feel is the dialogue coming forward. It's group learning. It's a series of virtual meetings, if you will. We've got 4 major topics that we'll be covering: behavioral health services today, housing and service models for our March get-together, serving people with complex care needs, so that's in early May, and then aging in place for our 4th and final Learning Collaborative. And there'll be individualized planning. Sessions will include exercise, there'll be templates, sorry guys, there'll be homework here, et cetera, and we are open to conversations with folks offline as well as inline, trying to adapt for individuals, communities, and projects. It's very important to us, it's very important to HRSA that this really leads to knowledge and information that you can use in your daily practice. So that's going to be very important to us, and we're going to have some questions and want to know about that for you as well. And Cheryl, am I turning it over now?
Sure, I can introduce the next topic. So these are the 4 topics of this Learning Collaborative. So today we are starting with behavioral health services and supportive housing, and then we will go through housing and service models next. Third, we'll focus on serving individuals with complex care needs, and then finally we'll be looking at serving individuals who are aging in place in supportive housing. And the next slide, please. So we want to know where all of you are located. So if you could look at your screen, and in the top left-hand corner, there is a pencil icon. And then when you click on that, you're going to select the arrow and find where on the map you are. So if you could take a minute now to use your mouse and go up to that pencil icon. Thank you, Joseph and Rebecca. And just click Show Us Where You're At. We're going to use this to open up the phone lines in just a minute as folks will introduce themselves. We'll give you a chance to talk again. So Marcella said with the Learning Collaborative, it's not like a webinar where we just talk at you, but we're going to open up the phone lines soon and take you off mute. So we want to make sure we catch where everyone's located. We have a lot of you from California. Wonderful.
That's great. If this is all California focused, we can really get some deeper into some of the models and possibilities there. That's exciting.
All right, I'm going to give 1 more minute for folks to, looks like there might be a few people that aren't on the phone line. Okay. So what we're going to do is starting, great, thanks Tracy. So starting from the top left hand and then going down California, north to south, I'll say, we'd like to ask you to please share with us your name and your organization, and then a little bit about the local climate and your goals for services in supportive housing. So Rebecca, if you could unmute us, that would be wonderful. And then we'll start, Lucy, we'll start with you. And we'll go
Everyone is unmuted now.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So again, just going down the map from north to south, your name, your organization's name, and your goals for services in supportive housing, and a little bit about the local climate.
All right. This is Lucy. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So my name is Lucy, and I work at the California Primary Care Association. And so I'm here at Cindy Keltner actually asked me to participate in this first webinar. She's not able to join. And so what we're doing is we're really starting to track how to track the social risk factors in our health centers. And so we are trying to learn what the needs are and then eventually being able to try to form those partnerships to be able to fill that need.
Great, thank you. And Ginger?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So Ginger Smith, I'm the Director of Health Center Operations, and I work with Lucy here at the California Primary Care Association. And Cindy actually is going to be the main contact for this learning collaborative, but as Lucy said, she's not able to join us today, so Lucy and I are filling in. But I would just add to Lucy is that as the PCA, we just kind of want to understand more what our role can be within the supporting housing environment and just figure out, you know, what some options might look like on how we can support our members.
Okay, great. Thanks, and if it's okay with everyone on the call, even if a few of you are from the same organization, we'd love to just hear your name and where you're from as well, since you might be able to add a little bit of context. So we'll keep going down the line. So that would be Joseph.
Hi, this is Joey Crodagini from Santa Cruz County Health Services Agency, and we have a primary care clinic called the Homeless Persons Health Project. And we actually get HUD funding and have some permanent supportive housing programs. We house over 100 people throughout Santa Cruz County. They're all chronically homeless, and most of them are also disabled as well. And we participate in the coordinated entry process. The system just is being implemented right now. The live launch is really starting in March. And also with the Santa Cruz County Health Services Agency is Cesar Baltazar, Tom Corral, Georgina Ibarra, and Tracy Adolfo, who provide housing case management services. And we wanted to participate to see what other folks are doing, learn best practices, and try and, you know, share as much information as we can.
Wonderful.
And I have to apologize. I have to take another call from 11 to 12, but then I'm going to get back on, and that won't happen in the future. I just had a conflicting meeting.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, and welcome to you and your team. All right, so then Rachel Lee, I think you're the last one since Joey went ahead and introduced the rest of his team.
Hi, actually, we were experiencing some technical difficulties, so this is actually not Rachel Lee. This is Kirby Vanienberg and
Navid Poppin.
Hi, we're from Care Center in Los Angeles, and just a little bit about our organization. We're a federally qualified health center in LA in the Koreatown area, and our main services at this point is primary healthcare services and adult day healthcare, but we also are a managing general partner on 16 affordable housing properties, and our goal is to have our own project within the next few years. And so the reason why we joined this group is because we wanted to learn more about how we can best integrate our future housing services with our healthcare services, and we're also looking into getting a master list agreement for permanent supportive housing, intensive case management services, and just trying to get more experience so that we can be better prepared for projects in the future. So thank you.
Wonderful, welcome. Okay. Thank you all for humoring us with the unmuting. We'll be doing that later on and throughout today. But Rebecca, if you could go ahead and mute it just so folks don't feel like they're being listened to the whole time. We'll open it back up in a few minutes. Okay, so we're going to briefly review just what is supportive housing and services in supportive housing, just probably for the next 5 minutes or so that we all are coming at this from the same, with a level playing field. And then we'll get into behavioral health practices and services in supportive housing. So supportive housing is affordable housing where supportive service providers are actively engaging tenants in flexible, voluntary, and comprehensive services. It sounds like a number of you are already doing that or are partnering with supportive housing service providers. The housing in supportive housing is affordable. That means it's typically less than 30% of the tenant is paying less than 30% of their income, meaning if their income is zero, then they would be paying $0. The housing is permanent, and it comes with a lease, and it is independent housing. Supportive housing is a proven solution to some of the community's toughest problems, and it really provides the scaffolding for the delivery of more effective and responsive public services. So high-quality supportive housing ensures that tenants' units are located within safe neighborhoods with access to transportation, public transportation, employment opportunities, opportunities to become leaders in their community, to socialize and be more connected, and then access to services that are flexible, that meet the tenant's needs, that can grow and shrink based on the tenant's interests and involvement and needs. That said, the tenants have leases identical to those of anyone else who is not in supportive housing. At times, this might mean that an agency has a master lease and tenants have a sublease, but that sublease does not require participation in any services. It is identical to any other lease in the community for tenants not in supportive housing. Services being consumer-driven, it means that they are really geared to be attractive and engaging to meet tenants where they're at, and is really based on tenants' choice. And then finally, we see that high-quality supportive housing impacts the greater community as well. Tenants are able to become more involved in their community, more connected, to meet community needs, and so it benefits everyone. So it's really also, because housing is a basic need, supportive housing meets that basic need, but then also provides a consistent and safe space for people to then address other needs and to become more involved in healthcare services and other community services, so that housing is the platform for all of the comprehensive supports that a tenant might need, like access to healthcare, case management services, accessing benefits. It's a way to engage tenants and to create a sense of belonging and community so that they can then manage their own care and make healthy choices. I like this slide because it distinguishes how supportive housing is different from institutional living. Again, from those of you on the call, I'm not going to spend too long on it because it sounds like a number of you are already providing supportive housing. But often when working with providers of group homes or other behavioral health services or partnering with behavioral health care providers, they may be more familiar with institutional living settings, and so it's helpful to be able to articulate how supportive housing is different, that individuals, with the same lease as any other community member, they can enter and exit at any time. There aren't curfews. They share units or have roommates or share their household based on their choice. If they want to live alone, they can live alone. They can decorate their unit however they please. They can schedule their own activities. They can participate in services or not participate in services. So these are examples of how it's very different from institutional living. It's affordable housing with voluntary services. And it's really targeted towards individuals who face the most barriers or who are the most vulnerable in our community, and that's often individuals who have been experiencing chronic homelessness, who've been cycling in and out of institutions like jails and prisons and hospitals and the emergency room, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or individuals that could be discharged from hospitals or institutions or other systems of care if that housing were available. And lastly, it's really to target individuals who without services would not be remaining housed and who without housing would not be accessing services, so those most vulnerable individuals in our community. We often also, when partnering with healthcare providers, like to refer to the triple aim alignment and how supportive housing not only improves the quality of care for individuals, but it reduces costs. It reduces those readmissions to the emergency room and hospital. It reduces other system costs like jail and prison costs because individuals are much less likely to be arrested for some of those activities that the experience of homelessness can lead towards. And then also it improves individuals' health outcomes. So people are able to stabilize. All right. So in the introductions, a few of you mentioned the supportive housing that you are either providing. I know there are some case managers on here. We'd love to hear in the chat box, if you could, on the top right-hand corner, click on the chat and let us know the supportive housing services that you are directly providing at your agency, rather than partnering to provide. So just some examples of what those services include. And I will say, when you click to send the message, be sure to click to send it to everyone. So when you click on the chat icon in the upper right-hand corner, then click to send it to everyone. I'll send a test. Okay. And at this time, hoping to soon. Others, what supportive housing services are you providing directly? How do you refer to them? I know some people refer to it as supportive housing case management. I'm curious to know what language you're using. Okay, regular check-ins, clinic services, including integrated behavioral health, thanks Joey, housing case management, and limited housing navigation. Okay, so some pre-tenancy and then tenancy sustaining supports. Okay. All right, so supportive housing services and who delivers them. We're almost done with this overview, and then we'll dig into the content around behavioral health services. This diagram outlines those core supportive housing services in the center. So in the center, you see the tenant who has choice and voice in their services and individualized service planning. That should be familiar to all of you that have a background in healthcare services already. Then immediately circling that tenant is the supportive housing core services. So those are any services that help someone to move into, identify and move into housing, to those pre-tenancy services, and then services that help someone once they've moved in to stabilize in housing and to remain successfully housed. So those tenancy sustaining services. We also talk about enabling services or service coordination that often happens with the supportive housing service provider and then other direct services, so other community providers. There are many examples where a supportive housing provider is also a direct service provider, so already providing medical care, already an F2HC or a behavioral health care or mental health care provider, and then they are also providing those core supportive housing services. That final circle is really around that care coordination piece, and we include this in here to distinguish between the enabling services that are core to supportive housing, where you're coordinating care or coordinating services to connect individuals to direct service providers, to medical care and to mental health care or substance use disorder services, and how that is different from care planning or utilization review. So I'm not going to read all of these because I would like to save most of our time for discussion, but I have them here because when you get the printouts, as you're looking through the services that you are already contracted to provide, you'll notice that some of these pre-tenancy support services and then some of these tenancy sustaining and housing stabilization services that are core to supportive housing really align well with many of the behavioral health services and case management services in terms of identifying needs through assessments, helping individuals to link to other community resources, identifying potential barriers to remaining housed and providing coaching on developing and maintaining relationships, on managing crisis. So all of these services are core to supportive housing, but also often align with other behavioral health or medical services. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marcella.
All right, Cheryl, thank you so much. Very, very helpful list of, I think of these as services coming from a healthcare background for myself as well, particularly behavioral health services. I think of them as really activities that are really required activities for people to be successful in supportive housing, and these services and different services and different functions can, and different service job roles can provide these services. So case management is really, I would say, the most common supportive housing. I'm sorry for the background noise. The most common service in that we find in supportive housing, because that's really case managers, and I say this as someone who was an case manager for 5 years, was, very much, you're a jack of all trades in that space. But we will also, as part of this, really talk about some of these other different particular job roles and, how we think about them in terms of Medicaid, how we think about them in terms of enabling services, which is a HRSA term. That's really, HRSA thinks of it as a clinical service and really connecting all of those dots to make sure that people get the clinical services they're entitled to. And then other folks in the Medicaid waiver world will think of it as service coordination, a combination of both ensuring that just the logistics are settled. A lot of people pulled in different directions for different services. Chronically homeless or not, we can only be one place on Tuesday at 10, as an example, et cetera. And then so that service coordination piece is just a different term for it. As we use a lot of these different terms and really cross some of these silos, we'll try to make a note of some of those terms, but if the terms don't make sense or we use acronyms, please ask us for that as well. I'm going to talk about behavioral health, trauma, and homelessness. We expect that, and in all of the communities that I've really seen drill downs on, folks with serious behavioral health needs also are significantly overrepresented in the homeless population, in particularly the chronically homeless population. And that I really, after years at this, really think about homelessness as a very lighthearted metaphor for a very tragic situation for people, but homelessness is really, it's a game of musical chairs. And in any given community, there's, 20 people and there's 5 chairs. And the question becomes, those 5 chairs being the affordable housing slots. And the question really becomes who can manage those systems in order to get access to one of those chairs, knowing that with 5 chairs and, we have them doubled up there, so people sort of sitting on each other in the chairs, so maybe 7 or 8 people are able to have that possibility. But folks with serious behavioral health issues, folks really stuck and caught in their addiction, folks with schizophrenia, folks with bipolar disorder and chronic depression, et cetera, we don't play the game very well and find it really, really hard to access those resources, find it really hard to hold on to family supports if they're untreated for those behavioral health issues. And so that's really a lot of some of the common reasons why these are folks who really fall out of all of these other systems and into the homeless system. Looking at HUD data, we've got over 250,000 folks who are experiencing homelessness and have a severe mental illness or chronic active substance use disorder. About 30% of people experiencing homelessness have a diagnosed serious mental illness, again, bipolar, schizophrenia, things of that nature. Homelessness is really a two-way street. It's traumatic to be homeless. So anybody who's experiencing homeless, we would say, is someone who's got a history of trauma, but it also can put someone at risk to be re-traumatized. Your trauma may have set off a serious mental illness in you. That serious mental illness may have set up a loss of resources, housing and services, things of that nature, and then becoming homeless just adds on to that trauma. So we're also going to talk about trauma-informed care as part of this presentation and dialogue, and we're going to talk about how you bring that to the services. Again, we certainly end with understanding that homelessness, I think anyone who, doesn't know on any given day where their next meal's coming from, where they're, where they're going to lay their head tonight is experiencing a trauma. So make sure folks are aware of that and make sure that as we build the service package, the service expertise, and the service that supports it, that trauma-informed approach is included. And I say a trauma-informed approach because that includes trauma services for the individuals that you are serving, but also recognizing what's called secondary trauma, the idea that you experience things every day as a professional service provider that can be traumatic for you as well, and making sure that we're included in our work as case managers and our work as program managers, in our work in a different way, that's self-care. That's a piece of that as well. So behavioral health challenges overrepresented in the in the homelessness sector, very traumatic for all members, and care for the members, care for the residents, and care for ourselves as well. I'm going to, Cheryl, I think you have the ball somehow. Am I allowed to take that back from you? All right, there we go. Okay, so behavioral health services are at this time undergoing a significant transformation. If you look historically, traditionally, serious mental health challenges, serious addiction challenges, they were served in institutions. If you look back into the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, people were part of institutions. People were institutionalized. People were, taught how to be good patients, and I choose that term patient very deliberately. As the institutions began to be downsized, communities started to move people into the community. But even then, in a community mental health center model, you have a very traditional, I'm the doctor, I will tell you what to do, very little choice in those scenarios for people, very few choices for people with serious mental illness or addiction on where they live, who they associate with, everything that's different from what Cheryl shared with us about what supportive housing is and how supportive housing moves forward. So behavioral health is really undergoing a transformation from that medical model into a much more person-centered model that is centered in choice, a person-centered model that is valuing the voice of people with lived experience. We certainly recognize that coming from the behavioral health world that significant numbers of people who really could benefit from behavioral health services choose not to access themselves of those services. People vote with their feet, as we like to say. Part of that is stigma, the prejudice that people experiencing serious behavioral health challenges face in our community, but part of that is also how we have structured our services, a real transition going on. It's important, you folks are all coming from California, so my hope is that some of the mental health services and mental health centers that you're seeing and that you're working with are really embracing this change into a person-centered model, into what we call a recovery-oriented system of care. Recovery-oriented systems of care are person-centered. As I said, they're grounded in choice. They let the person tell us what they need, and then we work towards that. I can look at that in my own career, trained as a psychologist, worked with people individually, and one of the things they came and said was what we need is housing, and housing wasn't covered in 10 years of graduate school, but housing is what we began to learn to figure out how to develop, because that's what persons needed to engage in their own recovery. So it's important to know that the behavioral health systems you're interacting with are in, shall we say, their own stages of change process, shifting from a more medical model, a more hierarchical, to a more person-centered, valuing people with lived experience. Listening to peer recovery workers, peer recovery specialists, and changing their services and systems, and really branching out into the spaces it sounds like you all are branching out to as well, in that interest in the supportive services and in the supportive housing. I'd love to hear from folks on the call, or is this something you're seeing in the transformation process, how the behavioral health, both the addiction services as well as the mental health is that a change you're seeing? Is that a conscious change that's happening? How do you navigate those systems? I think I'm looking primarily to the folks from Santa Cruz and some of the folks who said their role as case manager. Are you intersecting with those systems? Are they more responsive, less responsive?
Hello?
We hear some folks talking, but we can't hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. That's
Hi.
great.
Tracy Adolfo. I'm a case manager at Homeless Persons Health Project in Santa Cruz. And I'm definitely seeing a huge change in meeting people where they're at, and it's an amazing shift.
Morning. How long have you seen it? When did you see it? And what did, okay, start with that question.
So start over, I'm sorry.
When did you start seeing this shift? Is this in the last 6 months, in the last 2 years?
I would say about 3 years ago I was at a training, and they were talking about treatment and not asking people to leave if they relapsed. And that was when I first noticed, wow, there's a shift going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's great to hear. We're happy to hear that's happening. How do people respond differently once the shift is in process or happening? How are you seeing that the residents, your residents, I'm thinking of you as a supportive housing case manager.
The patients, you know, I don't know that I'm seeing any difference because I've always treated them like that. You know, I'm meeting you where you're at. I'm sure they're happy to know that they get to just go through their process and be supported, but yeah, I don't know if that answers it.
I'm wondering more, as you try to take them and connect them to other services outside your supportive housing, and you may do all the services in-house, so that may not be, so this may not be a relevant question. I'm wondering what change it makes for them as they try to connect to a more person-centered system rather than a more medical model system.
I would say the change is that they probably are able to be honest and get more help because they're able to, you know, just say, hey, I relapsed or whatever the case may be, and know that they're going to get support with that. Maybe more people reaching out.
That's great, Tracy. Thank you. Others have experiences similar, different, or not seeing that change?
Yes. Hi, this is Navid Poppin from Care Center.
I'll take my dog.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're not currently in the housing market. As we mentioned, it's something that we're looking to achieve, but we do have a background in behavioral health, and myself personally has a background in behavioral health. And I actually would say that, you know, in terms of approach, I think the person-centered model has been around for quite a while, to be quite honest. Prior to coming to an FQHC, I practiced for about 12 years, 10 years, 11 years, I can't even remember, but about a decade or so in direct mental health treatment. And the concept of person-centered model has been around for some time in the behavioral field. And I think what's happened over time is you've seen kind of a split where the medical model was kind of your old school thought process with the psychiatrist and so forth and so on, medication management, et cetera. We're moving further and further away from that. Psychiatrists are being trained to just manage medications while your clinicians are being trained to provide behavioral health services. And you're seeing less and less leaning on the medications and more leaning on a holistic approach. So it's good to see that this is something that's being implemented and integrated in the housing world, simply because you see so many mental health and behavioral health issues within this particular population. And if you don't really address the root of the problems, you're not really going to get anywhere in regards to sustainability. So I guess that's my 2 cents from someone who's not necessarily in the housing market, but has some background in behavioral health.
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And what organization are you from?
We're from Care Center.
Great. Great, great, great. And you are out of?
Los Angeles.
All right. That's great. Okay. And just this was some of the original starting questions we had for folks. Are you currently offering supportive housing, or your supportive housing residents are coming to your clinic, or are you getting into this space?
We're getting into it. So it's something in terms of our long-term strategic plan over the next few years. It's something that we're moving towards. That's
great. That's great. We're excited. Yeah. Excited to hear that, and certainly some folks on the call that I think can be good connections for you as well. That's good.
It sounds like it.
All right. So yeah, part of I would say yes. I would say I've been hearing person-centered rhetoric for the past 10 years. In public sector mental health, I've seen person-centered practice for a much shorter amount of time, and that's something we really want to make sure that is much broader. You know, there's such a change from when the new idea comes out to when the average person receives that care. So that's partly what we were trying, getting at in that as well. Oh, good. Good. All right. So best practice approaches that we want to see, trauma-informed care, we'll talk a little bit about that. Harm reduction. I think, Tracy, you talked about this when, you went to a training in regard to substance use disorder treatment and services, and, the shift from, oh, you relapsed, you're out, we're never speaking to you again, to, what happened to you, what happened in that process, how did that happen, and how do we, is it one of your goals in order to prevent that harm reduction again? Cultural competency, understanding that the folks we work with are from very diverse backgrounds. Their experience of healthcare is very different. Their experiences of racism, systemic and institutional, as well as interpersonal, is very different, and that we have to be culturally competent in all of those areas, understand the populations we're working with, particularly if they are different from our own background. And then finally, motivational interviewing, the idea that if you are meeting people where they are at, it is a constant process of moving forward, moving from here to there, looking at their goals. How often have we worked with folks, particularly in the homeless space, who, we may have a long list of goals. We think that these things would be very helpful for them. Their goals are different. Their goals may be smaller. They may be shorter. They may be simpler and more concrete. And we really build that relationship over time as we work from their goals. Not ours as clinicians. Again, really a different power structure than the traditional medical model. So yeah, are these strategies, best practice approaches that folks are using in their health centers? Is this something you're seeing as well? Here you go. Where did you read it? I hear someone trying to talk, so I don't want to shut this down. I don't know if it's a tech issue or... All right, I we'll keep going here. What do we mean when we say behavioral health? This is a term I'm finding a lot of people use in different spaces. Unfortunately, the two sectors, mental health and substance use disorders services, particularly in California, remain very, very separate. And so know that when we're using this broader term of behavioral health, we really mean it as a big umbrella of mental health services, of substance use disorder services, and recognizing the significant population that has what we used to call in the old days co-occurring disorders, meaning once the institutions closed down, a lot of people were more likely to receive their care in the community or maybe not able to access that care for folks with serious mental health disorders, and it was very, very common for folks to use substances in order to what we used to call self-medicate, and folks would be bouncing between these two disorders and systems. I know in Los Angeles we're convening a number of the substance use disorder service providers, and we're bringing them in to train them on harm reduction strategies, on motivational interviewing strategies, on what resources are available in the homeless service sector, train them on supportive housing, and train them on supportive housing as well. So that we're happy to share some of the work that's happening there over the next couple of months in Los Angeles. We're going to do a poll here. We're going to ask folks if you could, and Rebecca, I believe Rebecca from our team is going to be in the poll. On your top right-hand button, we should see.
Sorry, just a moment.
I'm looking for the poll questions. Okay. You're on mute too. Can you just start?
Just a moment. I'll open the poll.
All right. Here we go. So one of the things we want to know from your agencies, I know we've got some primary care associations on here, so obviously you wouldn't talk about the primary care association, but the health centers that work with you. What behavioral health services are the folks on here currently providing? Mental health only, substance use disorder treatment only, medication-assisted treatment for the folks suffering from opioid use disorders. Do you do referrals to connect people to other behavioral health services in your community? All of the above, none of the above. So if folks could click what works for you, for your agency.
Also, please be sure to click submit once you've selected your response. Marcella, we've had 5 people respond so far. Let me know when to go ahead and close the poll.
I'll just give a couple more, another 20 seconds there.
Sure.
All right, let's see what the answers are.
Okay, the poll results are calculating, and I'll post them in another 10 seconds or so.
All right, so folks are offering all clinical behavioral health services, so that's great. Thank you very much. It definitely makes us want to think more about, because folks are now doing all of these services, we also would want to talk about more integrated care models and what your health center is doing in the integrated care space. How do you build those bridges between your health center behavioral health services and your health center physical health services? Are folks operating as a health home at this point? That would be of interest to us as well. Anybody doing health home services as part of California's Whole Person Care Pilot? All right, I'm going to assume that's not the case. Okay, here. We're going to spend the next bit of time talking about what are some of the commonly covered mental health services, et cetera, and then thinking about how do they align with supportive housing tenancy supports. So an individual may be coming into supportive housing for the first time, leaving homelessness behind, hopefully, and then coming into your health center. What's the alignment of those services? Or you may have a service that you may be working with someone who's experiencing homelessness in your health center, and you want to see how you can help get them in supportive housing, and then how does that align with the services you already offer. So it really comes from both directions, people who are experiencing homelessness and trying to get into supportive housing, who need supportive housing, as well as people who are already in supportive housing and then begin to reach out to your health center. So these are a couple of the services that folks may be commonly covered mental health services in the system: brief intervention treatment, crisis services, day support services, day programs, things that are related to employment, things that are related to teaching people to manage their illness, family treatment, freestanding evaluation and treatment, group treatment. The most common trick I've seen in the system has been that the treatment plans that your health center has to offer, the recovery plans that your health center has to offer, needs to include something that mentions that achieving safe, stable housing, as Cheryl said, as a platform for a person's health care, is a treatment or recovery goal for individuals, and then a lot of these services will help them reach that goal. A lot of housing-specific services, housing-focused services may be allowable under documentation requirements in your state because you are trying to reach those because you are trying to achieve those treatment goals. Folks may be under a high-intensity treatment. This may be an assertive community treatment team or seen more frequently in your clinic, individualized psychoeducation, a whole other list here. We commonly see in a lot of supportive housing projects now a real emphasis on peer support. I think folks who, particularly those who've lived on the streets for a very long time, have a very unique experience. They really can offer that level of engagement, that level of having walked in the shoes of others, followed those values, et cetera, that is really aligns well with how supportive housing has traditionally looked at those services. Yes, a couple of other possibilities as well. Rehabilitation services, psychosocial rehabilitation services, skill building services. One of the things that I think is not too frequently discussed is what a challenge it is for people to really move inside. They're used to the community of chronic street homelessness. They're used to people always being around, constant stimulation, et cetera. We all think if we didn't have housing and then we regained it, it would be this, and then everything would be well after that. Unfortunately, it's a real challenge for people to move inside. It's a real challenge for people to get used to living indoors. It's a huge transition for people. Human beings just don't seem to like change, especially the older they get. And so peer support, we find, is a real key supportive service and key bridge into building into those other services. So all of these services may be offered by your health center. They align with supportive housing tenancy services. Again, the real trick here a lot of times is making sure that maintaining supportive housing or any kind of housing in general is part of your recovery plan, and think about how each of these services can assist in that recovery plan. Somewhat similar common SUD treatments and services, assessment, brief intervention, intensive outpatient, residential treatment. Residential treatment also has to think about how they align with the housing. What are the requirements of the housing? Many of that housing, folks in Santa Cruz, there's a very tight definition from HUD of homelessness. If you are no longer experiencing homelessness for 90 days or longer, you lose that HUD homeless designation. That can become a really important component as you look at how does residential treatment align. Case management services, that's also something that we see that the Medi-Cal, the substance use in California Medi-Cal waiver is starting to expand. So you may be working with someone who's living in supportive housing and has a substance use disorder. They now have access to case management services. Think about how you can do that as well. And then also we see, and I'd love to hear for the folks who, I think the Santa Cruz folks, you guys are doing supportive housing. If you can talk a little bit about how you interact, if at all, with the substance use disorder sector. Does your program have requirements in regard to, being involved in treatment? Are there, probably not, and that's certainly good. Tracy, you said you talked about how you meet people where they are. We also see at times people on medication-assisted treatment, not able to access some services and supportive housing in particular. So I want to know if you see any of that there.
Marcella, can you ask the question again?
Sure. Wanting to see if the substance use, are you intersecting at all with the substance use disorder system in your communities? And if so, in particular, are folks able to access medication-assisted treatment? And are they allowed, is that allowable within your supportive housing program or some of the other programs you see?
And the phone lines are open, so if anyone wants to respond to that, how it's working in your community.
Hi, Tracy here. Can you hear me?
Hey, thanks, Tracy.
Hi. Yes, we do have a medication-assisted program here, and our clients can, it's relatively new, and the patients do have access to it. I'm sorry, it was a lot of questions. What were the other ones?
I'm trying to keep the dialogue going here. Is there anything that they can't access while they're on medication-assisted treatment?
As far as housing or?
As far as housing, yes.
I don't see that. That's really been a block for anybody.
Oh, good.
Not really.
Good to hear. That's good to hear. Good to hear. And are you seeing the shift to a more recovery-oriented system, more person-centered system within the substance use disorder as well? You said you were seeing it on the mental health side.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely.
How do the treatment providers you work with deal with when someone relapses, when someone's, perspective on recovery changes?
Yeah, just like you had said earlier, like, where are you at? What happened? What can we do now? And moving forward, it seems like everybody I work with here at the clinic is very accepting and helpful, and they want to get everybody back on board and send a referral to therapy if they need it or get them the resources they need. But I haven't ever seen, that's it, we tried, don't come back here anymore. Complete opposite of that.
Great. That's great. That's great. That's going to have, it's a long-term impact on homelessness in your community, but going to have a really positive one.
I agree.
That's great. Other folks? How are you intersecting with the substance use disorder system?
I have a question. This is Kirby from Care Center. So again, we don't provide these services at this point, but I am curious. Our understanding is that it is for anyone who's providing these types of services, it's like a whatever it takes model of making sure that people are successful and can get back on track. But what do you do if you make these referrals for treatment if someone relapses and they don't go? Like, what is, at that point, what is the responsibility, I guess, the ultimate responsibility of the case managers? Like, is there a protocol for if someone is being non-compliant with kind of the...
If you're talking about the medically assisted treatment, we have a case manager that works with them, and I don't know their exact protocols as far as that goes, but I don't know if they move them to a different tier. I don't know because I'm not directly involved with that. I know they do have some protocols, in place, but as far as case managers working with them, we just, try again, try again.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think you asked a good point. It's very different from the case manager perspective, from the supportive housing perspective, and from the health center perspective, I would say the case manager, Tracy, like you said, it's about try again, constantly engaging. Do they need to be seen more frequently? Do they need a different service package? You know, do they need a different level of care? They may, you know, have gone for a while to intensive outpatient. They might need residential or detox or things of that nature. It's really reaching out to all those different pieces of the system from the case manager perspective. From the housing perspective, it's very much, are you complying with the terms of your lease? And that's one of the many reasons why it's really important that supportive housing residents have a lease. It's important that they follow the terms of the lease just as it's terms as anybody else, and they're treated really like any other tenant in relation to their terms of the lease. The one difference I would say with other tenants is that there may be a reach out and a request to the service provider, to the services to say, something's not right here, and can we, you know, what can we do differently because something may or may not be working. From the health center perspective, I think it's much more similar to the case manager in that you're constantly reaching out, you're constantly trying to engage, you're seeing, you know, think about it as I go in with what I think is the flu and they give me an antibiotic and it doesn't work, and so, you know, they do some more tests on me and try to figure out what it is that I have. Maybe it's not the flu, maybe I have something else. One of the things we really try to see in this shift to recovery-oriented systems of care is to have more behavioral health providers really taking that perspective. And, you know, we tried intervention A isn't working, you know, we need to go to intervention B or C or D or XXX. But it's that constant engagement.
To add to that, I think one of the things we're seeing now, and LA is actually having a supportive housing institute for developers and service providers that are interested in bringing more supportive housing online, and is that planning period of identifying your partners. So identifying developers that understand a harm reduction model and property management companies that understand that model, and ensuring that not only a lease agreement, that it is the same as any other lease, but that there's a clear understanding and support for how what your service approach is. And so there's a clear understanding from property management that your agency embodies a harm reduction approach, and that harm reduction could be in part wanting to prevent eviction for the individual if that's a harm that they're wanting to avoid, but also being very clear about that someone is not going to be evicted if they're not violating the terms of their lease, but have relapsed. That's not the cause for eviction. And so building those partnerships before a project even goes online, if you're having a building with designated supportive housing units, or as you partner with landlords, creating a landlord outreach strategy where you can find like-minded landlords and be very clear with your tenants and with landlords about that harm reduction approach. I've seen that go. It can go a long way in really helping to promote that and prevent eviction.
All right, good. The other strategy that we've commonly seen is communities are building in a variety of different ways. In communities, it could be your substance use disorder system or your managed care organizations, et cetera. Sometimes it's even agencies themselves getting philanthropic funds for something they call a risk mitigation strategy. Basically, this is funds in order to assist a landlord if there's damage to the property, things of that nature. You know, most landlords at the beginning of the day are basic capitalists. They're just trying to, you know, keep things going from a financial perspective. And so what we call risk mitigation funds can also be helpful in that space as well. Yeah. All right. So let's see. Okay, I am still host. Okay. Thanks, everybody. So we want to talk next about, there are multiple models for behavioral health services in supportive housing. I'm going to talk about a couple of those different models now. One is a case management, primarily case management model, where the case managers are providing supportive housing tenancy supports. They may have a fairly high caseload. They may have 25, 30 or more folks on those caseloads, and they're both engaging the individuals who are the tenants. They're helping folks both obtain and maintain housing. And then for clinical services, they're primarily doing referrals. They're doing referrals to behavioral health. They're doing referrals to primary care. And just like they're, you know, wanting to work with a network of landlords that best address their needs and best know how to support and engage their population. They're trying to learn who are the primary care providers, who are the behavioral health providers in their community that really understand their population and can do that good work. Then you may have a supportive housing provider who may have clinical staff who provide some behavioral health-related services. So there may be case managers that are part of the supportive housing services, and there may also be a therapist, there may be a counselor, there may be a nurse who does home visits, things of that nature. This is more of what we commonly call an intensive case management model. This is normally serving individuals who have a higher level of need than the previous model, and this is usually a smaller caseload size. So here you'll see caseload sizes in the, I would say, 1 to 15 to maybe 1 to 25, 20 maximum here for the case management services, and then the other additional clinical supports, the nurse, the therapist, et cetera, maybe one of these positions for a team of 30 or 50 people with some priority for folks that they're working with at any given time. And then finally, you see this is very similar to an assertive community treatment model where the behavioral health provider is offering supportive housing services as well. So this is the clinical services, the MSWs, the psychiatrists, the nurses, the case managers, often with a higher level of skill set. They're both supporting people in housing as well as doing the clinical services. Their priority is not to connect these individuals to a mainstream clinic, at least to start, at least in the beginning. Their priority is to make sure that people are in their housing, no longer homeless, maintaining their housing, and then really, again, from a person-centered perspective, addressing what the individual sees as their treatment needs in order to engage in the service model. So the common ratio there is a 1 to 10 case management ratio. So behavioral health services can fall in any of these different ways. People at times like to have conversations about outside the Housing First model of how engaged people are in services, how engaged they are in their recovery. I say we can put that onus on that individual, trying to get people to think more about Housing First and the importance of Housing First. I say we can put this onus on the individual and they need to do A, B, and C, or we can put this onus on the treatment system. A person with a 1 to 10 caseload who can be seen once a day, once every other day, things of that nature, doesn't need to be as engaged in services, just needs to keep that relationship and that connection going. And so I really strongly believe that it is on the service system in order to develop the individualized service packages that our tenants in supportive housing need, recognizing that all of us have service needs that change over time as we're younger, as we're older, as we have different traumatic events occur, et cetera, and those service models need to be flexible enough in order to address those individuals' needs. So when you see people talking about services and supportive housing, particularly if you're coming from a health center perspective, that's very much a 10,000 foot, it all looks the same from up at 10,000 feet, but when you get down closer to the ground, when you see exactly what those services packages are, very different. These are 3 common models that we see. I want to make folks aware of this, and for those of you who are thinking about developing this supportive housing services as a part, these questions about what's our case management ratio, what's our target population, what services are they going to come in needing is going to be important there. So I'm going to open up the lines for a little bit more discussion. I want to hear folks talk about, let's start with the first question, where do you see the intersection between services and supportive housing and the services you currently offer? For the folks from here, if you're getting into this space, what do you see as some of the unique services that you offer that can be valuable as you partner and develop supportive housing? I'll pick on you guys first. And I wonder if folks are on mute as well. You might need to unmute yourselves.
Hi, this is Navid from Care Center.
Hey.
Hi. So I'm going to go ahead and try to go down this list here. As far as the intersection between services and supportive housing, the services we currently offer. So we do offer both mental health and medical services. We actually are looking at it from a perspective of being able to actually do both, whereas it seems like a big focus throughout this presentation thus far has been on the behavioral health, and I understand that that's somewhat of a prerequisite. We would also want to look at integrating our medical services as well and offering that as a potential service for the residents or the tenants. In terms of what we might need to tweak, I think we do probably have to look at beefing up our behavioral health program. We currently have a small program, 2 social workers and a psychiatrist who comes in on a limited schedule. So we'd want to probably build that out a little bit further with a little bit more strength and preparation for something like this. And then we're not currently using any peer supports or community health workers.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. Other providers on the line, or for the Folks in Primary Care Association, what are you seeing in your network?
This is Ginger. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question so I can figure out how we can maybe help answer it from our perspective?
Sure. This is the questions that are on here. Where do you see the intersection between the services you're offering and the services in supportive housing?
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, we don't really have a clear sense of our members that are doing, other than the group that is on the phone today, which has been really helpful just to learn more about what they're doing. So I think that that's where we want to go, is we want to learn more about, you know, just what the supportive housing, what the service is, and just kind of determine what a landscape might look like to figure out what our role may be. So, I mean, this call has just been really great just to know about some of the great work that folks are doing. So it's kind of hard to answer at this point for us. And unless, Lucy, during some of our assessments that we've done, I don't know if maybe you've come across some folks.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you, Ginger. I'm trying to think about what our members are doing in regards to this, but I don't think we have a clear understanding of it. So I completely agree with you that this is something that's been very helpful, that is helping us with that. One thing that we do here at CPCA is we have a peer network where we have health centers join, and one of the main topics that we do talk about is housing. But we're just starting that up this year, and we have our first meeting next week. But other than that, we're trying to understand what's happening with our health centers.
That's great, and as always, we appreciate the focus on housing there and how important that is for the people that you serve. The folks from Santa Cruz, do you want to talk to us a little about this? You guys are coming from it as supportive housing providers. So one of my questions to you is, particularly I'm interested, are you using peer support or community health workers as part of your model?
Hi, anybody else besides Tracy want to answer? Hello? Okay.
Hi, this is Caesar.
Hi, Caesar. Go for it.
Yes. So I'm Caesar. I work at the Homeless Persons House Project here in Santa Cruz, and what we do offer in regards to the intersection between services and what we currently offer is we do the case managing component, anywhere from you know, medical assisted treatment to obviously the home visits to taking them to appointments with their doctors and providers, both for psychiatric and therapy. We also assist certain aspects, depending on the client, to assist them with Social Security, with benefits. So a lot of that is collaboration as well with a lot of different agencies. I know we spoke recently about the substance use disorder component, so we have great collaboration with our surrounding partners, and you know, helping them with the ASAM criteria, doing the basic part before we send a client out to some of the providers. So it depends, obviously, on the client needs. Some may need more than others, and that's how we break down our caseloads, which can range anywhere from 25 to 35 depending. So for us, it's a little bit of everything when it comes to medication. Transportation is another big component. And definitely talking with landlords. So it's a lot.
It's a lot, exactly.
Yeah.
What strategies have you seen make services of more interest to your residents?
I think it's the visibility of them knowing us a lot. I think they have that. The more we're there, the more comfortable they are with asking us for things, like when they are struggling with substance use or when they themselves see that a certain medication isn't working. They're more inclined to let us know first because we've known them sometimes longer than they've known their PCs, or they've been going off and on to their PCs or not showing up. They're more inclined to go to appointments when we're part of that process. So I think it is just, having a presence, having specific individual that they can go to instead of, sometimes it's a little harder with the population, when they get bounced around from person to person and, you're sending them here, they're going there, and they're going over here. So when they see that familiar face, I think it's been very helpful for them to build a level of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. This is great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that and some of the learning there as well. All right. Okay. We'd like to hear from you all now. Whiteboard activity, what topics do you want to see covered? We certainly have put out some of the things that we think are of interest, but it's most important to us that we're meeting your, training and learning collaborative needs. So please let us know what else you want to see covered. Rebecca, will you take them through sort of technology-wise how they do this?
Sure. So you're going to start the same way you did to get your arrow pointer, go over to the left side and click the annotation tool to open the toolbar, and then select the text tool. It has an uppercase and lowercase a. Then you're going to select a number and maybe shout out which number you are selecting, click next to it, and then start typing. If you don't indicate which number, then people may type over each other, which I may be able to decipher and leave with our presenters, but it's much easier if you select a number or are assigned a number. Let me know if you have questions.
Okay, so if you're getting an arrow, you'll want to switch and click on the text tool, which is the upper and lowercase a.
Once you've finished typing, please go ahead and click outside of the whiteboard for your text to show up for everyone else.
These are great topics. Thank you, guys. Landlord outreach. I know you folks in California have a very tight housing market.
For viewing purposes, if you're having a hard time seeing the end of the sentence, go ahead and click the zoom out button to the upper right of your whiteboard. That zoom function is for each individual, so you're the only one that can control your view.
This is great to see about landlord outreach and questions around that and starting a new supportive housing program, because next session we will be talking about housing and service models. And so we can be sure when we're talking about the housing models to include landlord outreach, and then what that means in terms of introducing harm reduction when you're outreaching to landlords and property management companies.
That's been starting. All right. Rebecca, are you seeing anybody still typing? I want to go on, but I don't want to shut anybody down who's giving us good information.
I'm not able to see as people type, so if we've moved on, go ahead and enter your topic in the chat, please.
Oh, yes, HIPAA-related issues. That's great. we can cover that, too.
Definitely cover that. Okay, that's great. So as Cheryl said, we've got 3 upcoming Learning Collaborative events. The Housing and Services Models, we'll send you a WebEx invite for that. That'll be March 22nd from 2 to 4 Eastern. I'm going to start putting these up in specific if we're all from California. It's also really great that if everybody's from California, we can really tailor this to some of the findings in California's Medicaid program. If other folks have joined who are not from California, please just this is Marcella, please just let me know, and we'll make sure, your areas are covered as well. The third will be on complex care populations, folks with multiple needs, both behavioral health as well as other chronic physical health needs, and best practices in working with that population. That'll be May 1st. And then the third, aging in place. And for those of you who are in the Los Angeles area or are joining us at the CSH Summit, we'll also, that'll be great to be in person. We'll also be on WebEx, and that'll be June 5th from 1:30 to 3:30. So we have 3 more learning collaboratives, and we'll be reaching out to folks with the details of all of these next. As I said, CSHS Summit is June 5th to the 7th, 2018 in Los Angeles. Please save that date. Check out our website for information on how to register if you're interested in joining us, and it'd be really great to meet some of you folks and good people in person. Save the date for the summit. We have some next steps, some questions. Rebecca will be sending out to everybody who's a part of this some questions about data and information. What information from the Uniform Data System can you use to track social determinants of health questions? So save the dates, register for the next sessions, have your team come together and think about what some of those questions are, and we really look at it in a community context, meaning that we want to see how some of the data that you're using can be used to advocate for supportive housing services, particular service models, service needs that really address the folks in your community. And I believe this is, am I shifting it back to you, Rebecca, or is this still me?
Still you, please.
So this is just our final Q&A, as we're closing down. So we'll make sure that you get the access to today's recording. But if anyone has any additional questions, and we have a few minutes now, we can take any other questions about the process, about times, just additional discussion. And if not, we can give you back 8 minutes to your day. So just a reminder that you can access the recording and the slide deck. We will send you an email with the recording and slide deck. And then feel free to email either Marcella or I if you have any additional questions in between or before our next session. You will be getting an email from Rebecca Cortez at csh.org shortly, and it will have a Word document with 3 questions around data. And we'll be using your answers to those questions. We'll be reviewing them in our next session as we talk about services for individuals and populations with complex care needs. So with that, thank you, everyone. Thanks for speaking up, sharing with us over the phone and chat on the whiteboards. We really appreciate your flexibility with us, and we look forward to continuing this learning community with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great